Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, whatever this is for you. My name is James, and this is episode 2 of the Writing with James podcast, where we talk about life, the universe, and things you didn't want to hear in the first place. And episode 2, and I'm already slacking. I've had a lot of, I'm not even going to try and even hint at explaining what's been going on at work. The real job, the bill payer. But I've had a lot of things come up there. And between that and then I did a world-class bios on the Fantastics, if you follow the YouTube channel. I do these things called world-class bios, talking about pro wrestling. And some of the guys that appeared in world-class wrestling did one on the Fantastics, so it was basically 2 people in one video, and it took a long time to put together. And by the time I was done with that, I said, okay, I need to step back for a couple of days, but then all this stuff started at work, and I was trying to get the podcast ready to go, and it's just everything's been against me. So I come in here a little bit later than planned, but that is something that you should know about me if you do follow the YouTube channel. I can't have a set schedule. It's just impossible for me to do that. So we come in a little late with this one, and what I've been doing here lately, what Writing with James, the vlog, always was just whatever was on my mind. And some months I would have nothing. I would be in a situation like this where I had a lot going on at work and just hadn't really been doing anything outside of work. And then there are months like this one where I actually had a lot of stuff on my mind, and I was kind of dipping my toe into a lot of things. And one of the things that I had been doing, I kind of been, of course, again, if you follow A View from the Middle and have dug around in the archives a little bit, you know that I've done a little ghost hunting, and I kind of revisited some of that, and got me thinking about some of the paranormal stuff. And one of the things, of course, paranormal people think that's ghost hunting. A lot of that's kind of been misidentified, or a lot of people just associate paranormal with ghost hunting. But paranormal is actually a rather big umbrella, and a lot of things fall into what is considered paranormal. And paranormal is actually just anything that doesn't have a clear explanation. So it's ghost hunting, it's UFOs would be considered paranormal, and one of those things that is considered paranormal is there are a lot of stories about traveling to different dimensions. Now, I include that as paranormal because I don't know if it's true or not. That's any of this. Like I say, I've done the ghost hunting. I don't know if there are ghosts. People say, well, where's your proof? Where's your proof that there aren't any? I'm not trying to prove. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. I've seen enough with my own eyes and heard enough with my own ears to know that there's something going on. I think it's most highly probable that it is some kind of ghostly activity. I don't know that it is. That's one of the reasons I do I'm trying to, maybe figure something out. Traveling to different dimensions and things like that, I really don't know what to think about it. But I do know someone, if you follow the YouTube channel and have been listening to Writing with James for a while, there was a guy that I knew, and I passed his story along during one of the Writing with James vlogs. And I did not give his real name. I changed all the names of people that were involved in the story. I called him John. And just to give you a kind of a brief rundown of that, John said that he went to bed, or was going to bed one night. Well, he was wide awake, was reaching to get the remote to turn the TV off, and it's just like somebody hit a light switch, and he was just, it's like more like he passed out. So he was not sleepy, but just all of a sudden everything went black. And he woke up in a different world. At first, not even realizing that he was out of place. And I told the story of how he walked around in this, and once he did realize that he was in the wrong place, it was like he had a headache, or got hit in the back of the head, or and he was walking around in this town where the place he's from was kind of the same, but was also different. It was a little bit bigger. There were stores there that were kind of the same as in his real life, and there were similarities and there were differences, and then there were people that he knew in real life that were not part of this other world. There was at least one that didn't exist at all. And I just kind of got started thinking about that, and I knew there were other stories out there that I had seen before. Most of them I tried to track them down. One in particular, I can't remember all the details, but a guy that he said he was out, he saw a new restaurant. He was with his family. They stopped at this new restaurant. They went in, they ate. Great food. He loved the place. And then, like a month later, he decided, I'm going to stop by this place again. And he went there, and it wasn't there. And he asked around there, and there had never been a restaurant in that location. Nobody knew what he was talking about. And I couldn't really find those, but that's kind of what I wanted to get into, is talk about some stories of people that have said they have had these experiences, and it turned into something very different. So I'm just going to take you down this rabbit hole that I ended up on, and I'm not even finished with it really, because when I kind of got to, like I say, with all this that's going on at work. I kind of had, I just need to go ahead and I just want to go ahead and get something out and let everybody know that I have to put some effort into real life for a little while. I'm going to just take you along with me as I go through some of these stories. Now, some of them are quite simple. Not everything is like mind-blowing. It's just like this first one here. It's called The Vanishing Road. This was a story from a younger person from Arkansas. They don't give a name or even if they are male or female, but the story they tell took place in 2012. And they lived near a fairly small town. The house was outside the city limits, tucked away on a back road, woods surrounding it. But it was a reasonable walking distance from town. And the storyteller would go for walks with their younger brother, who was 13 at the time. And just outside town, they came across a new paved road. One of those that was just black asphalt. There was no dividing lines or lines on the shoulder or anything. And I thought, well, that's odd. And at first I thought, because all the other roads in that part of town were gravel, and it was strange seeing this paved road, but also they had put this road in pretty quick. So not that long ago, the whole area was trees and brush, and now there was this road that had the different kind of trees lining it. The trees lining it looked like little miniature versions of redwood trees, which were not native to the area. So they stare at it for a little while, and they decide, well, we'll just walk down the road a bit to see what's down there. And as soon as they stepped foot on the paved road, the temperature dropped about 5 degrees. Not a lot, but enough to notice. Well, I ended up walking about 3 miles down this road, but they didn't see anything but the trees and the paved road. And it would be getting dark soon, so they said, well, let's turn back and go home. So when they got back, they stepped off the pavement, and there was the sudden change of about 5 degrees again, this time going back up. Well, they decided, well, we'll go back earlier the next day, and we'll give ourselves a little more time and see if we could find where the road leads. Well, they go back the next day around noon, and the road isn't there. The entire road was gone. The trees and the brush were back. So they even examined the woods and saw no signs of a road ever being there. And they asked around, but nobody knew of any road work being done or a new road being put in. So that's a pretty simple one. They didn't encounter any people. There was nothing along the lines of altering their own existence. It was just a road that was there one day and gone the next. But the elements are there. And one important part of that story is it happened to two people. What the dreamlike state John was in from the story I told earlier, which I'm going to leave a link to that if you want to listen to the whole story. It's just having to take his word for it, and there's nobody else to confirm what happened. With the simple story of this road, this person would have their younger brother to back up their story. Much like this next story that happened to a group of people. The story is about a man named Yusuf. He passes the story along, and Yusuf is from Botswana. And after completing his senior secondary education, he was enrolled in a national program where he was sent with other young men to another part of the country. It's kind of a Peace Corps within the same country, more or less. They were traveling through the country seated in the back of a truck. Where they were going was pretty remote, but they were happy to see there was a town not far from their destination. It was already dark when they went through, and they didn't stop in the town, but it looked like a typical town with a few people doing some late shopping and some others milling around. And when they finally got to the small village where they were going, they figured the town to only be about 20 kilometers away, which is about 12 miles. And the group could still see the lights in the distance, and they all agreed when they got settled, they would see if they could go back and visit the town. Well, the next morning they asked the driver to take them back to the next town, and the driver said, well, I can't do that. The nearest town's 120 kilometers away, which is about 75 miles. And Yusuf said, no, there's a town that's only about 10 or 12 miles away. And the driver refused again, said, no, the nearest town is 75 miles away. And I can't do that. We can't go 75 miles away just at the drop of a hat. Well, they all just thought, well, he just doesn't want to go. So they asked the villagers about the town, and they saw, and none of the villagers knew of any town that close to them. That night, they looked in the direction of the town they had seen, hoping to see the lights, but there were no lights now. They had just vanished. Now, they had no real options because they couldn't just take off on their own, but at the end of the month, the driver was going to take them to the town that was 75 miles away, and when they went through the area where they saw the town, sure enough, there was nothing. There was no town, just jungle, wild animals. So that's a story that, if it were one person, you could write it off as a hallucination, or that he just nodded off and dreamed the whole thing, something like that. But a whole group of people saw the town. They saw the lights in the distance. Even if they were all somehow sharing the same hallucination, that in itself would be an odd story. But there are some more famous stories along these lines, and one of them is the man from Torrid. This is probably the most well-known case of possible interdimensional travel. But there's also no hard proof it ever happened. And the fact that it happened in Japan in 1954 also raises some questions. I wasn't in Japan in 1954, obviously, so I don't know exactly what things were like, but you do have to remember this was only 9 years after World War II ended. International flights to Japan were probably rare, but that still isn't proof that the story didn't happen. So it's kind of that same thing. It's not proof that it's true, but there's no proof it's not true either. But as I said, this story takes place in 1954 at Japan's Haneda Airport. They were checking passenger passports as they normally would, but one passport that belonged to a well-dressed businessman looked a little odd. They pulled the man aside, and as it turned out, he spoke fluent French and Japanese, so the communication was not a problem. The passport showed that he was originally from a place called Torrid. Officials at the airport questioned him about it, and he was a little confused, but he said it was a country between France and Spain. His passport didn't seem fraudulent. It had stamps from various other countries that looked legitimate, but nobody there had heard of a country called Torrid. And customs officials feared he might be a trafficker, but they had no evidence of that. So they told him, well, we're going to have to put you up in a local hotel for the night while we investigate this matter. And the man was a bit distraught and argued that he had traveled to Japan several times with no problems, but he agreed to go to the hotel. And they kept his passport and driver's license, which was also issued in Torrid at the airport. And guards stood outside the room all night, but the man wasn't in the room the next day. The room didn't look used, the bed wasn't slept in, the bathroom hadn't been used, he simply just disappeared. His personal effects were being kept at the airport, but which was several miles away. All of that disappeared as well. He just vanished. Now, I know of no proof of this actually happening, but it is one of many stories like it from over the years. The fact that it's centered as historically recent as 1954 may be the reason it's so well known. But there are other stories of people from places that don't exist. One of those stories is from 1851 in Frankfurt. A man named Jofar Boren, I have no idea if I said that right, was found wandering the streets confused. And German officials stopped to question him, and he was able to answer in very broken German that he was from a place called Lexaria. Now, of course, none of them had heard of a country called Lexaria, so they asked what continent it was on, and he said Sakria, which just confused them more. And they tried talking to him in various European languages, but he didn't speak any other language other than the broken German and a very limited amount of broken English. Through his German, they learned that he spoke Laxarian and Abramian, with Abramian being the more common language. He also followed a Christian religion called Ipatian, which none of them had heard of before. He claimed that he was coming to Germany to find a long-lost relative, but none of the maps he was given were doing him any good. And once again, the man was left alone. He simply disappeared without a trace. Now, sometimes you do find a story that does have someone specific lending some confirmation, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a confirmation of the story. One of those stories comes from Peru's Marcahuasi Stone Forest, and I don't know if I said that right either, which has been believed by many to be a portal to another dimension for centuries. There are a lot of stories of travelers who go there, never to be seen again. But there was a woman, apparently fairly recently, that went there with friends, knowing full well the stories that surrounded the place. And people in her group claimed they came across a cabin in the middle of the stone forest and heard what sounded like a party going on inside. They looked in a window and saw people wearing what they described as 17th century clothing. The woman started to enter the cabin, but she was pulled back by her friends, and when they pulled her back, she was immediately paralyzed on the side of her body that had crossed the threshold of the cabin door. Well, they took her to a doctor named Raul Rios Centino, who diagnosed her as having hemiplegia, which is simply enough is paralysis on one side of the body. Dr. Centino, as the story goes, said an EEG showed that the left side of her brain did not show normal functioning and had an abnormal amount of electric waves. It was said Dr. Centino is also an investigator of the paranormal, and he suggested that the momentary trip that half her body made into another dimension permanently altered her nervous system. So I decided to look up Dr. Raul Centino, and he is a real doctor from Lima, which is the capital of Peru. Problem is, he is a dentist, an oral surgeon. Centino got his DDS degree in 1999 and his MD degree as an oral surgeon in 2007. I'm not so sure that gives him the credentials to treat paralysis. So I suspect this was a story that had been around, and somewhere along the way someone decided to add a real doctor's name to it, and Dr. Raul Centino became part of the story thanks to a Google search. But those are some of the stories that are out there, and some of them well known, some of them not. Many of them likely nothing more than urban legend, but it did bring to mind a very interesting place, commonly referred to as Skinwalker Ranch. Now, just to give you a little bit of the history of Skinwalker Ranch, it's also known as Sherman Ranch, and at one time the Ute Indian tribe was on and around that land. The Utes had an on-again, off-again relationship with, well, pretty much everybody they encountered. They were allied with the Navajo for a while, then they were fighting the Navajo. And they were trading with the Spaniards, then they were fighting the Spaniards. And they were friendly with the Comanche, then they were fighting the Comanche. In 1789, there was an official treaty of peace between the Spanish and the Utes, and as part of it, the Ute tribe agreed to give aid against the Comanche and the Navajo. And as the United States started taking that land from the Spaniards, the Utes slowly became allies of the U.S., though it took a few years. And in 1853, the Utes asked the United States to aid them in protecting their land against other tribes along the Arkansas River. Even that didn't last, as the Utes attacked Fort Pueblo a year later. But an official treaty with the U.S. was in place by 1855. 1860 was a pivotal year as the U.S. established the Northern Ute Reservation on and around what we now call Skinwalker Ranch, and the Utes agreed to join U.S. campaigns against the Navajo. Sometime during all of this, no specific time period, but sometime during all of this, it is said the Navajo placed the Skinwalker curse on the land. Okay, now, what is a Skinwalker? Okay, according to Navajo legend, Skinwalkers were very powerful witches who were once healers and medicine men, but their power corrupted them and they became evil. They are said to be able to change shape or take possession of animals or other people. And the U.S. would build a fort on Skinwalker Ranch, and the Utes would have land surrounding it. But there was no public record of anything out of the ordinary until 1906, when homesteaders in the Uinta Basin would hear strange noises. They were described as muffled explosions or distant thunder rumbling. And nobody really thought much about it, other than it was just strange. But it was noted that the sounds happened just as often in the winter as they did in the summer, and they had no clear source. Okay, in 1937, the Myers family bought the land. Okay, now with the land now privately owned and a little more accessible, the strange stories really began coming out. Between 1940 and 1960, a man named Pat Stringham says he saw both UFO and Skinwalker activity on the ranch. It should also be noted, he never provided any proof of these sightings, and nobody from the Myers family ever saw anything out of the ordinary on the land. And the family owned that land for over half a century. But it should also be noted, the 1940s and 1950s were not exactly a time you could be open about seeing things like that. Some people may have feared being institutionalized if they admitted to seeing anything. It also wasn't like today where everybody has a camera in their pocket, and it's not like anything to capture evidence was that common and that easy to simply carry around just in case you came across something. There was also one other group of eyewitnesses in 1979, the Arnold family, who owned land nearby. They claimed they saw a UFO over the ranch. But again, there's no actual evidence other than the eyewitness sightings. And in 1992, Terry Sherman and his family bought the ranch and moved there after remodeling the house, which took quite a while. The Shermans moved onto the land in early 1995, but only lived there for about 18 months. They say the reason they left is they started to have some strange experiences and seeing strange things, and they went public with it in 1996 with some of their stories. The son and daughter of the family had seen 3 specific types of UFOs over a 15-month period. One being a small box-like craft, another being a craft they said was about 40 feet long, and then a third that was described as being several football fields long, so several hundred yards. They saw other lights in the sky that would emerge from an orange circle, kind of a circular doorway that seemed to appear in midair. And supposedly there is a video of 2 of those sightings. I haven't seen it. I have not seen the video. I don't know if it's out there or not. One of the lights followed Gwen's car. Gwen is Terry's wife. Followed her car home from work one night. When they first started seeing these smaller lights from a distance, they were kind of low to the ground and appeared to be headlights. And Terry thought maybe it was kids on 4-wheelers or something, even though that didn't really make any sense either, as the ranch is very isolated and miles from the nearest main road. They would eventually see them fly up above the tree lines, making it obvious they were not 4-wheelers. They had other experiences as well. Terry says he was out in the field one day and he heard male voices speaking in an unfamiliar language, but he never saw anybody or anything around. The Shermans also had some of their cattle mutilated, but it was done in a surgical, bloodless way. The first one they found hardly had any damage done to it other than a hole in the center of its left eyeball. There were no particular tracks surrounding the cow, and a strange chemical smell was present. Later they found another cow with the same hole in its eye, and this is disturbing, a hole about 6 inches around and an inch deep cut out of its rectum. They say the UFO sightings were around the time 7 of those mutilations happened. Other ranchers in the area have also had some strange cattle mutilations, and that is actually documented with the Unitah County Sheriff's Department, at least the ones that were reported. Eventually the cattle started disappearing altogether. And while there was snow on the ground, they came across the area that looked like a cow had simply been lifted from its place, the place it stood. The tracks led into a field and just stopped. The area was surrounded by broken sticks and twigs, and nearby trees looked like they had been cut off at the top. There is an independent investigator from the area named Joseph Hicks, who the Shermans did talk to before making their stories public. He had done quite a bit of research and came across a lot of people that didn't dare call the police or figured making an official report would do no good. And according to Hicks, there had been thousands of UFO sightings in the area around Skinwalker Ranch between 1950 and 1996. And Hicks investigated more than 400 from that time frame and matched up several of them with mutilations that had been reported. And that's just UFOs. The Shermans saw other things. One of the first strange sightings they had was a large wolf-like creature stalking the livestock pen. They saw the creature grab a calf in its jaws and began to walk away, and Terry fired at it with a handgun and then a rifle. He hit it both times, but the creature was unfazed and just simply wandered into the bushes. In the next few weeks that followed, visitors reported seeing unidentifiable creatures in the woods that would sometimes roar. And that's basically as far as I've gotten. But yeah, I'm going to kind of say, of course, I think a lot of us have heard of Skinwalker Ranch. I had heard of Skinwalker Ranch. I'd seen a few things, but I hadn't really dug that deep into it. And in doing this thing, trying to prepare for this talking about interdimensional travel or possible interdimensional travel, I just fell into this thing about Skinwalker Ranch, and I'm still kind of reading up on it. And there have been other sightings of these big animals. So let me talk about that a little bit more. So this was kind of going to end up being a very choppy, odd episode. But if you'd like to, I'm going to talk more about Skinwalker Ranch. I guess we'll try and center it on that. And also, do you believe in any of this? The interdimensional travel, the skinwalkers? If you know much about what's going on at Skinwalker Ranch, do you believe any of it? Are you open to the idea? And if you have any kind of story, feel free to share it. Well, this is not at all what I had planned on doing. But this is just kind of the way it ended up. This is just where it fell and landed. But yeah, I'm going to be doing the real job for a while. I've actually got to work. I was supposed to be off today. I end up having to go in and work a shift, and not going to have a day off for a little while, and may end up having just one day off a week for a little bit. Say it's an odd situation at work too. With having technically we don't even have a manager right now. I wish I could tell more. I just don't know how much of it I should be telling. It's kind of one of those things. But I hope you did enjoy this rather odd episode. This somewhat slapped together episode. I will try to do something a little more meaty, a little more controlled next time. But I did want to go ahead and get something out there. I have some other things in the works as well. Coming out with some more wrestling stuff for the YouTube channel, and I got a couple of pretty good ones. It's just a matter of having the time to sit down and actually do them. But still, I hope you enjoyed the stories. I hope you enjoyed the ride. Thanks for coming along on the ride. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Not necessarily in that order. And I will see you next time.